All right, good evening, everyone. This is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, November 15th, 2016. We're going to call to order, and we're starting tonight with some sad news that probably most people have already heard, but Milton resident George Thompson passed away on Friday, Veterans Day. We had a moment of silence for him at the Veterans Day ceremony. George was a member of the greatest generation. He served in World War II. He was part of the D-Day invasion. He served at the Battle of the Bulge. He was a recipient of the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and the French Legion Medal of Honor that was awarded to him about 10 years ago by a former French President, Sarkozy. George and his wife, Anne, were very dedicated members of the Milton community, and George was a 40-year veteran of the Milton Town Meeting and had never missed a meeting during those 40 years, which is really something. So he and his wife, Anne, did a lot to help the children's work in the schools through the local history programs, and he's going to be very missed. So the board offers our very deepest condolences to Ann Thompson and the members of the Thompson family, and we're now going to observe a moment of silence in memory of George Thompson. Thank you. Okay, we have no minutes to approve tonight. Our future meeting dates, we have a meeting with the planning board tomorrow evening in the Carol Blute Room, which is going to be regarding 3 matters. We're posted for Governor Stoughton trustees meeting as well as a selectmen's meeting for the Ice House development on the Parkway, a master plan committee update, and also the town farm affordable housing discussion. Do we have anyone here tonight who would like to address the board at Citizen Speak? I know we have Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, would you like to come up to the table? Before I recognize Mr. Kelly to start, just want to clarify something because we've had some inquiries about the agenda, and there's been some information on social media that's been a little bit inaccurate. We were going to have an agenda item for this topic, which relates to military compensation for town employees who serve in the military. It had been on our agenda last week. It was removed before the agenda was posted by the town clerk's office. It was removed by mistake, but a mistake that had, an honest mistake with good intentions. That Human Resources Director has been preparing a report on this issue for us. She's doing some research among the practices of other communities, and her report was not going to be available tonight. So the item was removed from our agenda for that reason, but we are going to have it on our November 29th agenda. And I reached out to Mr. Kelly yesterday to let him know that we would give him some additional time during Citizen Speak. We normally try to stay to 3 minutes. Because he was expecting to be an agenda item tonight, we're going to give him a little bit more than that, and we're also going to have him back on November 29th with the Human Resources Director so we can have a full discussion. For people who are watching, the open meeting law does not allow us to have a full discussion with Mr. Kelly on this topic because it's not on the agenda. So I do want to take a survey. By show of hands, are there other people in the room who are here for Citizen Speak tonight? Okay, I don't see anyone else. So, Mr. Kelly,
Madam Chair, if I could just take a moment to clarify. It was me that decided to make the decision to take it off the agenda, not your HR director. I felt that it was best that you received a report that she's been working on so that you would have all of the information and be informed when you made your decision. So it was really my decision to take it off the agenda.
I'm sorry, I meant that it was
Yes.
because her report was not ready and she had made the request. Okay, so Mr. Kelly, we're happy to hear from you, and again, we'll meet with you at our next meeting as well.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Kevin Kelly. I'm a resident of 81 Fuller's Lane in Milton. I'm also the Vice President of Milton Firefighters Union. I'm the grandson of a veteran, the son of 2 veterans, the husband of a veteran, and myself a veteran of the 82nd Airborne. I'd like to start by wishing a happy belated Veterans Day to all who have served and who are currently serving. God bless America. I'm honored to stand here advocating for the employees of the town of Milton, currently serving in our nation as citizen soldiers in the Reserve and National Guard elements. These men and women give up time with their families to ensure the freedoms we enjoy every day. But as we all know too well, freedom is never free. As Elmer Davis once said, this nation will remain the land of the free as long as it is the home of the brave. This is so very true. The willingness of our young men and women to serve our great nation is directly proportionate to the way they see our veterans being treated. I'm here to say when it comes to this, Milton is falling short. Every year we have a Veterans Day parade to honor all who have served. It is a great turnout of the people of this town. Veterans are recognized, politicians speak, and we all have a chance to express our gratitude to our current and past servicemen. It is very beautiful and very important. But as JFK once said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget the highest appreciation is not to merely utter words, but to live by them. This November, the middle school had a contest named What is a Veteran? Webster's defines a veteran as a person who has served in the armed service. Lieutenant Colonel Goodson, USMC, defined a veteran as someone who wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. This is called honor. I grew up in this town. I graduated from Milton High. I have watched over the last 30 years, Milton went from having no heat in Mr. White's classroom to the flourishing community which we have today. We have all benefited from the ever-increasing real estate values, the always improving schools, the safety provided by our excellent police department, and the peace of mind knowing that if anything goes wrong, the fire department is seconds away. In 2011, Money Magazine named Milton the second best place in the country to live. I can tell you the man that wrote that article was not a town employee serving in our National Guard or Reserve. In 2012, while deployed to Afghanistan, Milton firefighter Tim Allen played an integral part in moving troops, weapons, and supplies throughout Afghanistan. Leaving 2 young children and a wife behind, he proudly put his life on the line to ensure the horrific acts like September 11th would never happen again. Upon his return, his loving wife threw a party and a hero's welcome, which he truly deserved. The town of Milton, however, notified him that they had made a mistake in his pay and promptly informed him that he owed them roughly $5,000. The mistake they referred to was the salary for the first month of his deployment. This payment is owed to firefighter Allen in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 33, Section 59, which states that any employee of any municipality in the state of Mass is to be paid full salary for the first 30 days of a deployment. The difference between his full salary and his military base pay for the remainder of the deployment shall also be paid. This is the minimum standard. The town of Milton did pay the difference to his family in a check for roughly $8 a week for the time he was deployed. Being a true man of honor and dignity, Tim paid the town of Milton back every penny they asked for. To this I asked the people of Milton, is this how we want to treat our veterans? The story continues. Upon his return, firefighter Allen continued to serve in the Air Guard, religiously showing up for drill, first weekend of the month and 2 weeks in the summer, year after year. Because of how our fire schedule works, firefighters work a 24-hour shift, 10-hour days and 14-hour nights. Rotating schedule has us working roughly 26 weekends a year. 6 to 8 of those weekends are the first weekend of the month, or drill weekend. During work weekends, where firefighter Allen is drilling, he is forced to pay the town of Milton back the salary which he would have earned had he not had to fulfill his patriotic obligations that weekend. This usually amounts to roughly a $5,000 a year pay cut to serve our country. I find this deplorable. Mass General Law, Chapter 33, Section 59 states that any employee of any municipality shall be paid up to 34 days' salary for time missed to attend drill or annual duty. So why is it the Allen family is not protected? Due to state laws, the state cannot tell a city or town how to spend their money. And this law, as it is written, must be adopted by the local town's Board of Selectmen or in a town meeting in order for it to be enforced. I'm here tonight to inform the Selectmen that I will be asking them on November 29th to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 33, Section 59, to cover any town employee serving our country. This board has a very unique opportunity, one that many of us will never have, to directly impact the way our community treats our men and women in uniform. A majority vote by you, the Selectmen, adopting this law would be a true show of support and appreciation for those willing to give their lives so we may remain free. In the same way, the Selectmen adopted Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, Section 19, protecting the financial interest of the taxpayers of the town. I implore you to adopt this law, protecting the financial security of our soldiers. In our next meeting, I will explain this law in detail. It is not new law by any means. In fact, we are the only community on the South Shore that I have spoken to who is not paying our soldiers for their time. I am always available for any questions. I ask every veteran in the town of Milton and every family who loves their country to make their voice heard. Make sure the soldiers are treated with the respect they deserve. Furthermore, I, as a resident, propose that the Allen family be reimbursed every penny that has been taken from them since firefighter Allen's date of hire. We owe his family better than this. We owe them our true appreciation and not just uttered words. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I believe there was no one else for citizen speak tonight. Is that correct? All right, thank you, Mr. Kelly. The next item is a hearing, public hearing with our Board of Assessors. I believe we have some members of the board here, or if not, then they may be waiting in the hall. Thank you all. Good evening. Our Board of Assessors.
They're here, yeah. I don't know where. I saw them walk in and walk back out.
I don't want to move on to anything else because that was noticed for 7:15, so let's give them a minute. They may be conferring out in the hall. Good evening.
Howdy.
Brian, and Bill, and Bob.
Good evening, Brian.
Hello.
Bill, Bob. Brian, would you just introduce all of you for the record?
Sure. Bill Bennett, Board of Assessors, and Jim Henderson couldn't make it tonight. He's traveling and he got held up, so he was hoping to make it, but he couldn't, so his apologies. And Bob Bushway, who's our Chief Appraiser.
And Brian
Cronin,
Cronin, Chair of the Board of Assessors.
Yes.
So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
So we're here for the FY17 tax classification. We have some written materials with a recommendation from the Board of Assessors. Would you like to present this to us?
Well, I think we'll probably just hand it over to Bob and let him kind of run through the options, and then, if you have any questions, we can discuss that. So.
Sure. And let me just add, if I didn't at the beginning, this is a public hearing, so we will take any comments from the public before we close the public hearing and we have a deliberation.
Okay, so this is our annual tax classification hearing that's required by law each and every year. The Board of Selectmen are required to make some decisions as to what direction we want to move as far as the tax rate goes. So typically, from the past several years, there's always been a shift tax rate. The board is recommending that as well this year. The three main things that we'd want to consider is a residential exemption, a commercial exemption, and then the tax rate shift is what the three votes would be. Milton, as far as I understand, we've never had a residential exemption or a small commercial exemption for various reasons. And then the shift has typically been right around between 1.5 and 1.6. So this options page is what we typically look at. Right now in FY16, the shift is 1.57, meaning we're taking some of the total value of the town and shifting more of it into under the commercial and industrial personal property class. So that tax rate is higher, and it allows the residential tax rate to be lower. So right now it's $13.50 per thousand on residential and $21.70 on the commercial. So what we did this year for FY17, once our values were approved a few weeks back, we took a look at what property values have been doing, and what the board typically likes to do is try to even out the tax burden each and every year. So this particular year, it looks like a shift of the bottom option 4, that's also highlighted in yellow, would be 1.55, and that would basically level out the tax burden to both classes to about 4%. 4% for residential, 3.9 on the commercial, which coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, but that's exactly how much the tax levy is increasing from last year to this year. the 2.5% increase automatically, Prop 2.5. You've got debt exclusions, and this is the first year that new growth is added to the tax levy as well. And then the firefighter, $500,000 is also added to the tax levy this year, so that's the 4%. So that's basically it. The board has a recommendation on the next slide. And the recommendations kind of at the bottom there as far as what direction we want to go in.
There it is.
And then I've got other slides in there too, mostly a lot of charts, informational, that you're welcome to look at if you haven't had a chance to take a look at them.
Yes, we've had the materials for a few days.
If there's any questions?
Thank you.
So your recommendation is, for the people who are watching or in the audience, is for a minimum residential factor of 97.7058, and that we not adopt a residential exemption and not adopt a small commercial exemption, which, as you noted, we have not done, at least in the recent past.
Correct.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board before we open it up to the public?
Just one. Last year, Bob, we had a, what the shift, well, if there were no shift at all, which was kind of an interesting, because our commercial base is so small, what the impact is on the residential tax rate compared to what the impact is on the commercial tax rate.
Right.
And my recollection is, just because, again, the commercial base is so small, the impact is huge on the commercial base,
Right.
and pennies, not quite pennies, but very, very
Right.
insignificant on the,
A lot less, because 96% of the total value of the town is residential, so it's fairly unusual to have a town that's so heavily residential to have
Right.
this tax shift, but
Yeah.
the problem is, once you start shifting, it's really
Hard
hard
to
to
move
go
the other
back to
way.
a single tax rate,
Yeah.
because even, you had 10 cents on the residential rate, that's still going to impact the average tax bill fairly significantly, I think, so. But, yeah, it's something that could be discussed in the future.
yeah. I mean, even if, only because, most of our commercial property are small businesses. Most of the businesses don't own their buildings, they're landlords that own the businesses. But, if you could even funnel some of that money, some of that savings back into improvements in the commercial, because, those are old buildings that could really use some help.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think, we're starting to see an economic turn in East Milton.
Yes.
Specifically with some, rehab of some buildings,
Yep.
Navarro and so forth. And
Right.
there's some expansion going on. So I think the economy is,
It's doing some of that, yeah.
But that's a good question. It is something that we should look at in the future, because these businesses, are paying a much greater amount, and, they have been kind of sucking it up for the rest of the town. So,
Right. And my recollection is something like a $2,000 increase to the average commercial business, and maybe a $100 increase to the average residential.
Right.
The difference. So it's that kind of, or decrease, just to get that shift. But
some towns that do have a shift and want to walk it back to a single tax rate will do it over
a period of time.
a 3 or 5 year period, and they'll kind of have that as an agenda going forward.
Okay. Let's see, where are
Do
we?
we have other comments or questions from the board, or anything else the assessors would like to add before we open it up to the public, if there is anyone here from the public to comment tonight? Okay, and do we have anyone who would like to speak to this matter who's here in the audience tonight? Don't see anyone? Then anything else from the board?
Nope.
Why don't we close the
No,
public hearing
no.
and we'll go into our deliberation? We have a recommendation from the Board of Assessors.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minimum residential factor of 97.7058, not to adopt a residential exemption, and not to adopt a small commercial exemption.
second that?
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Number 6 on our agenda is a conference with members of our Shade Tree Advisory Committee, and I think we have at least a couple of members here tonight. including Peggy Chow, our committee chairman. Good evening, Peggy.
Good evening.
If you
How
have,
are you?
I think you've got other members from the committee. If you'd all like to come up, we could pull up some extra chairs to the table so that you can come up and join us.
Thank you.
Please feel free.
Madam Chairman, that's your seat right there.
That's okay. You're a true warden.
Peggy, why don't we turn that microphone to you so that, so you can be heard through the TV.
So, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome.
My name is Peggy, Chair of the Shade Tree Committee. And here with me, our town tree warden branch, Nancy, Kristen, and Fred. So first,
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a miserable night out there tonight.
perfect timing for indoor meeting.
That's right.
So I have so all of you already got my formal report and
Yes.
presentation slides. And here's just some highlights that we would like to go over. And then the other one is just an example of a new tree deco that we put forward to DPW for consideration. But first, I wanted to thank you for having us, and then also for your strong support of a Milton Community Strategic Reforestation Program to preserve the natural beauty of our town. 3 of our committee members was not able to attend, but they've been, we've been working very hard together. And then I also wanted to thank DPW and Conservation Committee, and special thanks to Barbara Martin for her assistance, and then also to Fuller Village that allow us using their comfortable meeting room with our committee member, Jens, for reserving that. So, and also really wanted to take the opportunity to thank our committee once again for everybody's volunteering, and then also for so much collaborative good work and all we have done so far since we first met in March, right? So at our first meeting, Selectman Town show up and then brief us our charter, and then plus let us know the open meeting law. After that, as you can see the point, we are getting ourselves together, organizing, and then also started collaborating, outreaching. We had meeting with DPW Director Joe, and then plus GIS engineer, the subject matter expert for our town, inventory system. And then plus we attended the Conservation Committee's hearing. So, do I have a sheet? Thank you. And then the other outreach event is that we also participated, we attended the Green Pond Fair, and then plus celebrate Milton. It was well received, and then, we listened to our residents' voice, what they had to say, and their input, their concern. I think the majority of the feedback is everybody noticed over the past 10, 15, 20 years, we have been losing a lot of the trees. One is due to age, the other one is disease, and just natural attrition, and then lack of funding, so people are genuinely concerned. So that's the majority of the comment. And then I just want to go through the bullet. Later on, Fred committee member will go through a little bit more detail about the preliminary tree inventory, trying to assess the magnitude of the problem that we're having here. And followed by Kristen, she's going to brief everybody, talking about how we revamp the shade tree recommended list, and then go through, the right tree, the right species for the right place, right? And then we also started identifying some funding possibilities, and then also looking into town budget. So on behalf of the Shade Tree Advisory Committee, right, I wanted to recommend to the board to consider $30,000 annual tree planting budget to be added, to be included in the town budget. Again, Fred will go through the detail, how we derive to that, budget. And then for the coming year, goal is we're looking at a complete tree inventory with technology, going over using the GIS, maybe using the tablet, and then trying to figure out what's the effort, how long will it take us. And then plus, we're going to be working, support both tree warden and then also our DPW director and his team to figure out, the proper site, and then do tree restoration, and then maybe focus on example like entry point, gateway, the Sioux fairs. So this is again for next year, and then we looking at one of the things that we're looking at is the potential funding is DCR, because DCR federal level believe this year they approve a 10-year plan. The plan is coming out from the federal forestry. There's a plan. And then local, state level DCR is going to be monitored and execute that. So one of the important thing is we wanted to be reinstated as a Tree City USA. So we will have an opportunity to get a grant. From the history some of the history I was able to find is from 1993 to 2007. The records show, there's some gap, but a total of 11 years, we, Town of Milton, received over total of 102K grant for various project program with the matching fund. So going forward, I think, this is one avenue that we're exploring, that we're looking into. And then reaching out, through outreach event and then education. And this is an example of, when we plant a new tree, we can put on the deco, just trying to implement some of the co-op event. So I'm going to turn over to Fred and go over, very high level of a tree inventory. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
All right. So as Peggy said, I'm going to talk about the inventory, which is one of the things that we were asked to take care of. Obviously, we have to have an inventory to know the magnitude of the problem and what solutions might be possible. I think there were two things we were trying to deal with. One was, would it be possible to do this inventory on our own, just with our volunteer time, or would we need to bring in, a professional company? And then the other thing was, could we, in this first year, get at least some preliminary information so that we could, get rolling, rather than have this, take years to get money in the budget or figure out how to do things. So, as Peggy said, one of our main contacts has been Alan Bishop, who is a GIS expert at the DPW. And so he's happy to build us an app so we can go out and do an inventory ourselves. But the really interesting thing he did this year was in August, he sent us a Excel spreadsheet, which was of a very thorough tree inventory, which had been done in town in 2007. which none of us, I don't think, were aware of. It was done with a grant. Are you guys have our presentation? Because I'm going to refer to it, but I'm not actually going to be looking at everything that's in it.
We do have copies of it.
Okay, I'm on page 3. So anyway, there was a grant. I think it must have cost around $30,000. 2 arborists came to town in the fall of 2007 and actually inventoried or documented all the tree sites in Milton. And they put a lot of information about the importance of each individual tree, which I would say we now realize is not of much use to the town. It's just way too much information. But the important thing they did going forward is that they actually also documented the vacant sites as well as the sites that had trees. So if you had a strip of trees along a road and there was a gap of a couple of yards, they would actually put in GPS coordinates for the sites where there should be a tree. And you know, why this is so helpful to us is, first of all, we can calculate perfectly, I would guess, what the tree deficit was in 2007, because it's all recorded in this database. We can look with a new inventory, we can actually figure out the attrition rate every year, which is going to tell us, I think, at least how much has to be in the budget just to stop the attrition. And then it will immensely simplify an inventory, because all we have to do is go to each of these GPS sites and just say what's there and not go through all the rest of the information gathering. So I wanted to just say a couple of interesting things about this inventory from 2007. You know, they documented 6,218 sites, and they talked about what condition the trees were in or whether there was any tree there at all. They actually, in their inventory, had 2 types of vacancies, an optimal and a less optimal vacancy. And what we realize is that the less optimal vacancy generally means that there's utility wires overhead, or that maybe in some cases the tree belt between the sidewalk and the street is very small. So what we're trying to do to handle that, and you'll see when we talk about the new list of trees, is that, you know, just by using small trees appropriate for those sites, we think we can fill this in. The other interesting thing from the 2007 inventory was you could actually list out the top trees in Milton by percentages. And the top tree happens to be the Norway maple. And this was 30%, 31% of the trees in town was the Norway maple, twice as much as the next common tree. And the reason I point this out is because the Norway maple, although it's a great street tree, is now banned in Massachusetts because it's an invasive non-native tree. So we don't have to take them down, but we can't plant them anymore. And so that's another reason why our tree list had to be revamped going forward. So the other thing that I can say from this 2007 inventory is that at that time, if you just add up the dead trees, the stumps, and the vacancies in their database, that actually came out to exactly 700 basically empty sites. About 11% of the tree sites in town, even in 2007, were vacant. And I'll get back to that number later. So what we decided to do then to try to move this forward was to do at least a sort of a poor man's re-inventory very quickly in the fall once we had this database available to us. And this was, you know, pretty simple. We would just print out the list for a given street and then go along the street and see which trees were still there. And what we found, and we did about 10% of the tree sites in town during the month of September, just very intermittently. But of the trees that were listed as good and fair in 2007 in their inventory, we actually found that 21% of those had been removed in the 9 years since that inventory. And if you looked at the trees that were already listed as poor in the 2007 inventory, 60% of those had been removed in the last 9 years. And we also could determine that the actual, so those are just total trees removed and replaced, but the actual replacement rate is only 20%. So that means of all these trees that have been taken down, 80% have never been replaced. So you can, this is only 10% of the sites in town, but just to try to extrapolate this up to the whole town, we think that the net yearly attrition rate, trees that are removed and not replaced, is on the order of 120 trees a year. And we don't know how accurate that number is. When as Peggy said, we've talked a number of times with Joe about things, and he stated that the DPW is taking down about 100 trees a year and replacing about 30. So their attrition rate is 70. And the attrition rate I'm finding is a bit higher than that, maybe even 50% higher, and we don't know how much of that is due to residents taking down their own trees and not replacing them. We know that happens, but we don't know the magnitude of it. Anyway, to get to the real bottom line here, we wanted to figure out what it would cost to actually keep up with the attrition rate. And so we needed a money amount for the amount it costs per tree. And so we actually have a great way of measuring this right now because we have the Copeland funds. And they gave us $20,000, as you know, last year. And because the DPW didn't have the manpower to do this themselves, it was bid out. And I believe Thomas and Sons won the bid. And they can do 50 trees for $20,000. So that's $400 a tree. And that's, planting, buying the tree, planting the tree, and maintaining the tree for 2 years. So anyway, the simple math is 70 trees, using the conservative number from the DPW, 70 trees a year times $400 is about $30,000, above and beyond what the DPW currently is spending on trees, because this is making up for the attrition that is ongoing. And if you look at these numbers, it has been ongoing even before 2007, but these averages are for the 9 years since 2007, so this is not a new phenomenon at all. And then just for another number out there, the total tree deficit now in town has basically doubled since 2007. It's around 1,400 trees, and at this $400 a tree, we're talking basically about $500,000 if you wanted to just plant out every site in town, which I'm not even sure is a reasonable proposition. Some homeowners might not even want a tree for that matter. So that's our bottom line from what we've been able to figure out so far. We're going to do the tree inventory, I hope, in May and June, and have just a very solid number for the whole town. And in answer to my first query was, could we do this ourselves? I think with this work, seeing what the other inventory looks like, seeing what's available as a database, I do believe that we should be able to do this at least in sort of enough of a way to get to the magnitude of the problem just by ourselves next summer.
Wow.
So unless there are any questions, I'll let Kristen.
Okay, so the next question is, how do we fill the void? So assuming that we get $28,000, $30,000, $500,000, what do we do with the holes in the ground? And so what we came up with as a group was this notion of right plant, right place. I'm sure people have heard it before. And it essentially came down to survivability. We wanted to ensure that if we're going to spend $400 on a tree, that it should survive. And so the criteria was drought tolerance, it was salt tolerance, compaction tolerance. It also addressed the size of the tree and the wires, so we had small, medium, and large trees. And we tried to lean toward natives. Actually, I think most of the trees, with the exception of perhaps 2, are native trees. And we came up with that recommended tree list. We spent quite a bit of time on it, and we submitted it to the DPW on August 18th. And so the DPW, I believe, is now using that tree list as part of the tree lottery, and we hope that in the future we will use that list and we will refresh it as a committee as needed. If there are different, we're trying to call out different varieties that might be more compact and or salt resistant or whatever. So disease. Or disease resistant, exactly. So one of the
One of the things that we're concerned about, or one of the things that we want to stress, is that even in the master plan that we've seen that the town has come up with, is tree canopy is key. And I won't go into the benefits of shade trees, you probably all know it, you know, but it does increase home values. We know that, and it does slow traffic. And those are two big issues in Milton, fast cars and property values. So we're going here, we're asking for a line item, and then would also like to say that we are expanding beyond perhaps the line item to get into this Tree City. We have the reinstatement of Tree City status, which is provided by the Arbor Day Foundation. And if we can get that, it opens up real money to us. For instance, it was $20,000 for Tree City, right? $20,000 was the maximum for Tree City grant if you were had this Tree City status from DCR, and if you didn't, it was capped at $7,000. So it's real money. So 2017, that is a goal for us to get reinstated. We are also going to be looking far and wide at other grant opportunities, matching or otherwise, and we are talking to residents about maintaining their trees. Peggy showed you the labels. We want people to understand that this is, that beyond the maintenance that perhaps Thomas will give in the first couple of years, that they ought to be maintaining these trees. It's for all of our well-being. And so I think I'll turn it over to you, Branch, for our last bit.
We're cutting close here, so
Yep.
I'm sure you may have a few questions, Tom, David, Katie, Anne Marie, Emily. Very briefly, you guys did a great job in appointing this committee, because you got great people on there. They're very hardworking, and they're smart, and they're aggressive, and they're going to work like hell at this to get the job done. But there's a reoccurring theme here also. We need the 30,000, and it's got to be aligned, whether it's the third line in the warrant on the DPW, or whether it's a selectman's article or whatever, because to keep up the enthusiasm. I mean, Copeland kicked it off with a little bit of seed money. We got the possibility, and we're asking you to support us for the 30K. And these guys are going to work hard with the DPW in order to get increased funding. They've already looked at like several avenues. So, I mean, it's really a three-part program. We've got to get some support from the town. We've got to get some grants, and these guys work hard at it. And we've got to do some Chapter 90 funding for trees on any of the Chapter 90 roads. So I'm going to leave it at that, because as I say, we're cutting it close. We want to sustain the momentum, and as I say, you guys are an important part of that. So if you have any questions for any of the committee members.
Thank you, Branch, yes.
First of all, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Yeah. Kristen. What are the requirements for becoming a Tree City?
I'm glad you asked. We need to have a tree committee. So
We have
check
that.
the box.
Yeah.
We need to have a tree ordinance, or Chapter 87, I think is what it's called. So check the box, we have that. We need a $2 per capita budget, okay? And I think that, Joe, we get because of we spend a lot of money at DPW maintaining, so what are there, 28,000 people in town, so $56,000. So I'm not sure we're there. We'd have to talk to Joe and look at the numbers, but that's another requirement.
Okay.
And then the last is we need to have an Arbor Day celebration event. And that could be a tree planting, it could be something, I think we're looking for something a little bit more this year, because we have a lot of enthusiasm. Those are the 4 criteria.
Those all seem fairly doable.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we used to have that designation, it's a shame we lost it, but it's something I know the DPW was always very proud of, and likes to tell the warrant committee about it for a lot of years, but
Right.
we'd like to get back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we would
absolutely,
too.
especially with this matching funds.
Yes.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, as Branch said, you do have a great group of people, and we thank you for that, and obviously, you're obviously being very proactive. You've done a lot of research, and you have a good sense of where you want to be. But what do you anticipate as we go along in terms of ensuring that residents, in terms of your marketing, ensuring that residents are aware of how important it is once these trees go in. And I know that you've spoken a little about this, and I think this is a great idea, and trust me, I understand the value, and not only for the real estate, but also for the traffic calming and all of those certain areas that are so important, never mind the fact that it's a tree, and you know, it creates a great benefit to all those that have them. But what is that long-term plan for sustainability working with the town?
Well, it has, part of it is with the planting program that the homeowners are going to have to be petitioned to, you know, give us some support and do watering and maintenance. The sustainability in the first couple of years has to be at the expense of the contractor who's planted. You know, if you can get through 2 years and get some support from the residents, you know, you're well on your way. Unfortunately, you know, this was an extremely bad year with, you know, and we still are in the drought situation. But, you know, if we have close to normal rainfall, after a 2 to 3 year period, trees are pretty well established.
Yeah. What I think I'm getting at is, and I appreciate the good volunteer work that you're doing, and what I'd like to see, from my perspective, is that there is great communication between, and advice from your committee through the DPW, so that the DPW does their job to communicate to the residents and has ongoing dialogue with those that do have trees, because I think it's important. I think that the more we learn from residents, the more communication we have with residents via our department that's in charge of something, a program like this, is going to make it more effective.
One of the things that we've talked about is creating a Friends of the Shade Tree Committee to really develop those types of programs. So in addition to, because one of the things we recognize as well is that it's successful if you get folks engaged early on. And we're very excited by just the brainstorming we've done within the group. And one of these, again, is talking about doing a Friends of similar to the library, so that you have potentially these additional funds or resources that you can tap into, so as we go forward and have additional resources in terms of planting the trees, more and more enthusiasm builds around it, you can build a broader agenda. And again, I just think they've done a great job at the library to broaden that participation within the whole community. And I think if we look as a group, look forward 5, 10 years, and we have other examples of that in the state, not far from our community, that have been very successful with the Friends of, that we're excited thinking about the opportunity, because we recognize that's what's key to keeping it growing and going.
Sure.
So one other thing, you know, follow to others' comment is answer your question is using technology, utilize the social media, because Town of Milton has an excellent website. DBW not only have a website communicating with town residents, but then also have Facebook. You know, kudos to Joe, right? Because they reach out to many peoples, and then making announcement. And then library, we can initiate education outreach program. And then part of international ISA, the Arbor organization, they have open source materials that we don't need to get permission, that's available to the entire country, all the cities and town, to free to use it, download it, and update it according to our own needs, and then post it. So I think you know, we are looking for encouraging Town of Milton residents. In addition to, we're looking at you know, asking for additional funding support, but then we're also looking at the population to get up and adopt a tree, and in honor of, in memory of, you know, type of a program. So, you know, this is our very first year. We're just getting ourselves organized and then trying to reach out. And then, you know, once we have a little bit more experience, we know where we're heading and what are some of the key areas, then we can focus on that.
Right.
Question too, that just came to mind. Some of this outreach you're talking about, which I think is a wonderful idea, are you able to do that with no budget at all? I mean, are you able to do that with just volunteer?
We have.
Yeah.
We make the copies and, you know,
Yeah.
and, yeah,
Yeah.
we've done it.
So far, so good?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
I think
It's our
so.
contribution to the town.
What is the status of the tree lottery? Have all of the 50 trees now been planted, or is it still in process?
All 50,
Why don't you come up, Joe, because otherwise nobody can hear you.
and actually, in answering that question, let me just elaborate on the last question. So what we've done to promote public buy-in to the program over the years is we adopted the tree donation program. So we've already been getting people to do that, and that's where most of our tree plantings come from in every given year. And when people donate a tree, they tend to care for it. We've also, as part of that and as part of the lottery, when we put out the questionnaire initially, was we asked folks, would you mind having that tree planted in your front yard? The town would buy it, town would plant it, but on your property, because they're more inclined to care for it when it's on their property as well. So those two things have been proven out to be pretty successful. The lottery was drawn last January. We were about to announce it in March as where our schedule was, and we were going to get into a spring planting schedule, and then this committee came about, and I thought it was certainly premature, if not outright remiss, to roll the program out and stop planting trees arbitrarily with these folks just beginning their work. And it worked out to be a great strategy, because we worked through the summer, them establishing a list and then establishing a strategy of where priority trees ought to go. And it was in August when we last convened, as you know, when I was at a meeting, was the authorization to move forward on the tree planting. So we put the bids out. We've gone out, we've marked everything, so the tree plantings are ongoing right now for the past 2 weeks. Nothing physically in the ground yet. All the trees have been ordered and delivered. Those 50 candidates who were successful, 10 of them have been ruled out, that they just simply, and you heard Fred speak to that, there's simply no place in front of their property where they could accept a tree, between utilities and overhead wires and whatnot, even using the species. So we went and drew another 10, so we're well on the way to getting all of those trees planted this fall. Every single one of them we planted this fall. Had we been somewhat remiss and gone off and ignored the committee and planted them in the spring, but the summer that we had, the survival rate would have been horrible. We probably would have done, at best, 10% survival rate, so it turned out to be a pretty darn good strategy after all.
Joe, you anticipated what I also was going to say when you said the donations, but just for people who may be watching, just so that they know, it's possible for a homeowner to buy a tree from one of the local nurseries and then keep it at the nursery until the DPW can come out. The DPW will pick it up and plant it on town property at the town's expense, but the homeowner buys the tree and pays for the tree, and it's considered a donation to the town. So there have been a number of people who have done that. That's an option if you want a tree in front of your house, if you weren't lucky to get into the lottery and to be selected that way. We're hoping we'll have funding in the future. We have to see where the budget process goes and what town meeting ultimately does. So it's possible we'll have more funding in future years for more trees. But that is an option for anyone who might want to consider that.
It's part of my quarterly report, which we're making later on tonight, but I have no problem talking about that now, and I'll ignore it later on. I carried over $20,000 in FY16 money for tree planting because we were looking to leverage that money against that grant we applied for. You can't spend that money until the grant has been awarded. So right off the bat, we know we've got another $20,000 looming, and hopefully with some success on the grant, we probably have another $7,000 coming our way as well. And those would all be things that, we're going to, again, watch the climate. You can plant spring and fall. Fall is always optimum. And you don't necessarily want to plant in the spring. You can. It just takes more care to nurture those through the first growing season through the summer. So the goal is to use all of that, this coming spring with the award in place.
Can I ask, one thing I heard other towns do when they want to reach out to all the people in town is they actually set things in the tax bill. We could put in something in the tax bill about this program where somebody could buy their own tree, or at least about tree maintenance or something like that. Is it possible we can reach out?
We have to talk to the treasurer's office
Tax
about
bills
that.
come from a separate service, or do they get mailed by
The town
us?
treasurer, you can arrange, if the town treasurer so agrees, you can add something to the tax
We can
bill.
do one stuffer per year in our water billing cycle as well, but we
yeah.
typically are reserving that for various solid waste announcements.
Okay.
But on the best day, our Facebook page hits about 750 people with anything we broadcast out there. That limits in a big way the total population we're trying to hit, who may not know it, but the town's website has all the information on it as well. Word of caution to people who are watching at home is that when you buy a tree, talk to us first, because you may be going down and buying a tree that's not on the approved list. You may be buying an inappropriate tree from that list that may not fit in front of your home. So we would hate to have you make a purchase, and we see this an awful lot, but we have to go back and work with them after the fact, and then it's a little, onerous, and it's a little frustrating for folks who made, the good gesture of donating the tree to begin with.
Okay, well, we can look into that question with the town treasurer and see whether that might be an option. Any other comments or questions for the committee?
Joe, Branch had mentioned Chapter 90 money. Is the Chapter 90 money
So when a
available
tree
for
is
people?
removed as part of a roadway program, it certainly can be purchased with Chapter 90 money, but as a member of the capital planning committee, you understand the funding gaps.
Right, so it's
just
not
in the
extra
roadway
Chapter
work.
90 money, it's just you can use...
You can use your allotment for planting of trees as opposed to paving of roadways
Okay.
only.
Okay.
Okay, anything else from the committee or from the board?
I've done a very good job.
If not, thank you
Doing
very
very
much.
much.
This is very thorough report, thank you all. Thanks for all your hard work.
A couple of members, one of who is the Globe's writer for
Carol Stalker, yes.
Carol Stalker. And Tucker.
And Tucker Smith and Gene Powers, I think are the three who are not here tonight. Thank them and
Thank you
thank
again.
you all.
Appreciate it.
Good night. Number 7 on our agenda is a meeting with our police chief, who's the chair of the Traffic Commission, Chief King.
Chief?
Evening, Chief, how are you?
Chief.
Hi there.
So we have some Traffic Commission recommendations tonight, Chief.
We do. The first one on the first page there, actually, I'm going to ask if you would defer it for reconsideration by the Traffic Commission. If you want, I can discuss it, or we can defer it until the Traffic
This is
Commission.
the loading zone?
It is.
I think that's a good idea. It
Yeah.
sounds like the planning board needs to really consider this because it's tied to the Nova, it's built into the Novara permit.
Yes, I'm aware of that now. I wasn't, so, I accept responsibility. We discussed it at the Traffic Commission, and I didn't realize that. It was, the town administrator who made me aware of that after the fact. So,
I guess more importantly, what was the rationale for removing and not replacing the loading zone? I mean, in my mind, I think it's absolutely needed.
twofold. There was a lengthy discussion, as it has been at each traffic commission that I've been at. I can tell you, I've met personally with the chamber. It was a very strong push by them.
As somebody that drives through there on a regular basis and gets stuck behind beer trucks trying to make deliveries, and cars parked in the loading zone, it is a nightmare at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it is not unusual at 4:30 and 5 to see trucks out on Adams Street blocking the road.
I almost daily get a complaint or a picture sent to me, so I understand it.
From my standpoint, I would never approve it.
Okay, I respect that. We discussed it at length, different perspectives from all the different people on the commission. I've spoken to the chamber multiple times. They were very strong advocates of this. There were some people in attendance that were in favor of this. And there was some discussion among the traffic commission. I came on after this was originally created, but there was certainly some discussion that, and a feeling that prior to this going into place, it ran better. And that's basically where this vote came from. So, I respect this agreement. We're certainly welcome to reconsider it. I reviewed the permit that Town Administrator Fagan sent me. I understand the potential conflict there, and I'm more than happy to go back and reattack the issue.
I saw the part of the planning board's meeting about this last week, and I think their concern was they just wanted to be sure that before they took any action on that the abutters who really wanted it were notified and had an opportunity to come in and talk to the planning board. So they didn't seem to be opposed to reconsidering the permit, but they wanted input from the public. So,
Okay,
so it makes sense to defer it, I think, from us tonight.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. But
I spoke to a neighbor probably 5:30 p.m. today, a Church Street resident, and I believe, to be honest with you, I think both the traffic commission and yourselves are probably going to get a letter from them.
Okay.
Just saying essentially that, at least, the neighbors want to come in. There were no neighbors there. There were members of the businesses that were in attendance. There were no neighbors at this particular meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chief.
The next two down, actually, they're both underlined as Adams Street, but the first one is converting a handicap parking space in front of 550 Adams Street to conventional parking designation. And then right below it, I'll just do the two together because they go hand in hand. is install a handicap parking space on the southeasterly side of Adams Street, the intersection of Granite Ave, adjacent to the fire station side entrance. The reason they go hand in hand is there's a problem with the currently existing handicap spot, which is essentially in front of Abbey Park. It's on Adams Street at the intersection of Franklin. There's an issue there, I probably won't say it as well as the DPW director would, but there's been some issues with the Commission on Disability where people opening the doors, either the road's sinking and they can't open the doors, it's even hitting the curb, so to speak. So it would actually require like a construction project to fix that. We thought moving it to the other side, we actually eyed the spot in front of Dunkin' Donuts so that it would be directly across, but essentially the same location. The problem with that, ironically, after the last group, is there's a tree in the way. There's a tree that would prevent a handicapped van from like lowering a ramp or something like that. So we basically moved it up, so if you were coming over Boulevard Street and you came across through the firehouse, it would be the first spot on the right would now be a handicap spot, and we would do away with the one in front of Abbey Park.
Is the Disabilities Commission in agreement with that location? And the only reason I say that is 90% of the commercial business is on the other side of the street. So they have to cross the street in order to get to most of the commercial businesses.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we did not vet that with them. It comes up in discussion that night, so, we took the vote that night. We didn't go back and.
I would like to hear their
Okay.
view on it before I vote it.
All right, well, we can defer this to a future, these particular ones to a future meeting.
I'll follow up on that one.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
The next one, Lodge Street, it's install a no left turn, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. sign on Lodge Street at the intersection of Randolph Ave. You may be familiar with this, but it's basically cut-through traffic that's coming up Pleasant Street, mainly in the afternoon rush hour. It doesn't want to wait for the light at Randolph and Reedsdale, which is very congested and backs up commonly to about Bailey Ave. So they're cutting down Lodge, huge volume of cars, and, that's one concern all the residents expressed, but a secondary is then when they're merging out onto Randolph Ave, which is also gridlock oftentimes from Randolph Ave down towards about the pool and Milton Academy, Gun Hill Road, they're edging out and they're fighting for lanes, which then is blocking all the cars coming northerly on Randolph Ave. So it's actually gridlock in two directions.
Chief, related to that, and this is before you were the chief, this goes back probably 2.5 years ago, but it was around the time that the temple was being built on Schulman Way, and there were residents of Lodge Street in Maitland who came in and said they were concerned about traffic in general. The issue that you're talking about, which you'd be addressing this way, but one of the things the Traffic Commission I know was looking at the time, but I think it required state action because of Route 28, was the lights at the intersection right at St. Elizabeth's Church and the hospice, and they...
I've been heavy on that, too.
So I remember Chief Wells talking at the time about the fact that we need to have the state look at the timing of those lights to see, would the timing of those lights make any difference? If we could adjust it even slightly, would that help facilitate some of that afternoon traffic so that it might take cars off of Lodge Street and put them back onto the main roads if we didn't have the tie-ups? And I really don't recall where that ultimately came out. Maybe the Traffic Commission, remember, I know Mr. Lynch is sitting over here nodding. He might have some information because it was before your time. But if it's something that's still open, if we could look into it, I think we should try to investigate it further.
If I could chime in on the same thing. A while ago, I think it was our recommendation to at least get those no parking on the right-hand side of Reedsdale Road as you turn off of Pleasant Street. So at least cars could queue on, 2 lanes of cars could queue on Reedsdale, which helps a little bit. The problem is because of that curve, if there's enough room there for 2 lanes going down past Lodge Street, but because of that sharp turn, those cars that are making that turn and get stuck there are blocking all the other cars from queuing up. I think there's enough, it would alleviate most of that congestion if 2 lanes of cars could queue up all the way back, and if you let both lanes turn left. In other words, one's a left-hand only, the other one can also turn left. Because there's 2 lanes on Randolph, so you'd be able to do it. 99% of that traffic is going down Randolph Ave.
Correct.
Almost none of it's going straight down Reedsdale.
I agree it's going down Randolph Ave. A couple issues, and then I'll get back to your point. The bend certainly complicates that on Reedsdale Road. A secondary issue, there currently is a bike path there.
I know.
So, you'd have to factor that, whether you can retain in that, eliminate that if you were to make that 2 lanes.
Yep.
A third issue complication.
You'd have to
when-
restripe
You'd have to restripe it.
to make it come
But
up.
if you made both lanes able to turn left, there are 2 lanes on Randolph Ave, but currently, when that left lane can turn left on the Randolph Ave, the cars coming from the opposite direction on Reedsdale also are allowed to turn right on Randolph Ave. So basically, essentially, there's 2 cars coming in opposite directions going into those 2 lanes. If you were going to allow both lanes to turn left, you'd have to shut off the cars coming Reedsdale
Yeah,
Road,
okay.
and then maybe study what would be the impact in the backup going the other direction on Reedsdale Road.
Right.
I agree the timing's off, it's a state-controlled light. I can ask Joe, my understanding, not in my role as traffic commissioner from the police department, is the state did look at that, and they felt the timing was fine. They didn't see the timing is off. They have it programmed basically for a morning rush hour. And if I can just double-check with Joe, he was on the traffic
Okay,
commission.
sure.
We can take a seat. So back, it was about 2 years ago, we did petition, we contacted the state, and they did an optimization at that signal, so that the timing is optimized to the point that that intersection can handle the current traffic load and the current traffic pattern. Obviously, we started changing lanes around, as the chief just pointed out, that something would reverberate back on the Reedsdale Road eastbound, where they would have to shut down that allowed right-hand turn to allow the 2 lanes to move through. So they did not look at that at the time because it wasn't on the table, but they did optimize that intersection 2 years ago. The folks who were before the Traffic Commission 2 years ago about the general traffic was in concert with the concerns for what would result from the temple. It was the same neighbors and the temple who came in unified this time around requesting the left-hand turn, so they...
Yes.
Yeah.
My only concern about the left-hand turn is, unless you have something at the beginning telling people there's no left-hand turn, people are going to wind up down the end of Lodge Street and either make an illegal left-hand turn because they've gotten all the way down there, turn around and, which is even worse, or taking a right-hand turn, go into somebody's driveway and trying to make a U-turn, and that's all going to happen.
We did discuss that in the theory being, if there was a sign approved, we would put a warning sign out at Pleasant and Lodge Street, warning people that,
Right turn only or
Yeah,
something like
from
that,
these
yeah.
hours. So it was going to be approved, and if that was approved, a warning sign would go on the other end.
I think at a minimum that's necessary.
Yeah. Well, I know this was talked about at the time, too, this no left turn, and I think we were hoping that the lights might make a difference, but it sounds like that's been looked into, so, okay. Do we have anything else then on this particular recommendation for the no left turn from 3 to 6 p.m.?
No.
Would anyone like to make a motion on this one?
Yeah, I will. So we're deferring the first 3, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the following amendment to the traffic rules and orders. Article 8, Section 22, Lodge Street, install a no left-hand turn from 3 to 6 sign on Lodge Street at the intersection of Randolph Avenue.
Can I just make hopefully a friendly amendment, that it be done in conjunction with signage on Pleasant Street?
Sure. Accepted, yep.
And Tom, you're going to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous.
The only other issues are on the second page, about halfway down. Some other recommendations under that category. The first one is crosswalks, and the second was a crosswalk. The first one is a couple intersections in East Milton, Franklin and Bassett, and Franklin and Howe. That came out of meetings I had with the East Milton Neighborhood Association, and they're both pedestrian-heavy intersections. And then the one below it came from some residents that came in and basically, valid point, there's a crosswalk at Edge Hill at Westvale, and there's a crosswalk at Edge Hill at Grafton, and there's really nothing in between, which is a pretty long stretch. And we felt it meets the requirements. There just has to be a little bit of an adjustment there with the curb cutout and stuff. So that's what those two are. And then further down, just under the next category, discussion items, the fourth one down, just by way of an advisory. The pedestrian light at St. Mary's and the Hill School. The issue there currently is people have a green light, And, you'll see crossing guards step out or pedestrians step out, and, unfortunately, motorists often see that green light as, a symbol to floor it. And the thought was by changing it to a blinking yellow, kind of warning, cautioning people to go by both the school and the park crossing. And then not only a crossing guard or somebody crossing the street, but if they hit the signal, it will still go to a solid red, but it would revert back to a flashing yellow rather than a constant
Yeah,
green.
that makes
Just a
sense.
safety where there is a school there and there is a park on the opposite side.
That makes
Good,
sense.
that's good news. Chief, while we're on the Traffic Commission, we have on our agenda, and no need, I don't think, for you to stick around for this, because there's a few more things in between, but item 12, we're going to talk about some articles that this board may want to submit for the May town meeting, and one of them is Traffic Commission, because we want to have a conversation about the composition of the Traffic Commission and putting some residents on the commission. Also, I'm currently serving on the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and Dick Burke, who's one of our members, is kind of our point person on the committee for traffic, and he and I would like to sit down and talk with you about some Traffic Commission issues, so we're going to be in touch with you on that.
Certainly.
Relating to townwide traffic study, and also just the makeup of the commission, so we'll try
I
to
agree
set
with-
that up with you, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think two good, important issues to address.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Anyone else, anything for the Traffic Commission or for the chief tonight?
No, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Chief. The next item on our agenda is number 8, and it's a conference with our Capital Improvement Planning Committee. And we have 2 members tonight. Mr. Walker, School Committee, and Amy Dexter, our town accountant.
Hey, Amy.
Hi, how are
Amy,
you?
how are you?
Leroy, good evening.
All right.
Good evening. We actually have,
Leroy?
we actually have
And we have three.
three if you count Mr. Hurley.
We have Tom Hurley,
That's correct.
our representative on the Capital Committee.
Okay, so do you want me to
Would you like to
talk?
get us started?
What do you want?
So, about 6 months ago, the Capital Committee embarked on a process to try to create, for the first time, some policies that have to do with capital planning. And I'm pleased to say that that process concluded very shortly ago, and we now have some policies before you for approval. The thinking was to try to document some of the important aspects of the capital planning process, not the least of which was to clarify what some of the benefits are of a capital planning process and a capital planning committee. And clearly, this evening, the audience is the selectmen, but I think we would all agree that the larger audience is the taxpayers and residents of Milton who have an investment, we hope, in the assets of the town. So some of the clear benefits, just quickly, would be facilitating coordination between the operating and capital budgets, and that a policy will help us to do that. A good capital planning process enhances the town's credit rating, primarily by ensuring that there aren't any significant or dramatic changes in debt service. Identifies the most economical means of financing capital projects, and as I said, keeping the public informed about the current condition of our assets, future needs, and projects. So we opened the policy that you see before you with some discussion of benefits, but the 3 other areas that I think are the ones that will really move us forward are some policies about the capital budget, how that's put together, including asset management, which we talk about in more specific terms than we have before, debt policies about how we will manage debt and debt service, and last but certainly not least, how we will finance capital improvement projects. And there we talk about free cash. For the first time, we're suggesting that you make a commitment in terms of how much free cash will be allocated on an annual basis. And we set, in some very clear terms, and actually increased slightly, the percentage of operating revenue that would be allocated for debt service for general obligation debt. So we think that this is a very important step forward and will only help us as a town to secure our financial position going forward.
Yeah, one of the clear problems with our capital planning is so much of what comes through to the capital planning committee is really repair and maintenance things, and it adds up to quite a bit of money. And there's very few other sources other than debt in Milton right now to pay for capital improvements. There's one-time money when it falls out of the sky, as long as nobody else gets their hands on it. There is debt, and there is the paltry number that's in the capital stabilization fund, and usually that's about it. We try and manage debt to make sure that debt service doesn't start chewing into the operating budgets, and vice versa, that it doesn't fall off the table so the operating budgets start chewing into the debt service budget. So it's a careful balancing act, but it's hard. Right now we're up at a ratio that makes it difficult to add much more to the debt service without, again, starting to affect operating budget. So that's kind of what drove, I think, a lot of this. But I'll let you continue.
So Amy, did you want to add anything?
Just a couple of important things I think to point out is besides making a recommendation to actually document that 2.5% of operating revenue goes towards debt service. In the past, historically, we've used 1.9%, so that's a slight increase. As well as the town bylaw states that part of the definition of a capital item is something that's $10,000 or more. In this day and age, that's not that much money, so we're proposing that be increased to $25,000, so that some of these items that are more maintenance or repair in nature don't actually become part of the capital plan, but as part of the operating budgets. So those are two of the main things dollar-wise or percentage-wise that are changing, but also these are procedures that over the last several years, at least probably 5 years, that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee has been using as guidelines. We're just really trying to fine-tune them and actually put them in writing. One of the recommendations from the DOR Financial Management Review was that we document some of these policies, as well as when we talk to the bond rating agencies. Are your financial policies documented? This is one they always ask about.
Yep.
So this will go a long way if we can finally have this in writing and formalize it.
We have a broader set of financial policies, as you know, that we're kind of in the process of updating. We've split them up. Tom, I think you had the capital one, so this
Yeah.
may be something that you're looking to recommend that we replace or amend the existing one with. So it seems to me that from reading the materials you've submitted, you've given us these draft policies that you want us to take a look at and consider adopting, and then you're also proposing, I'm assuming this is going to be through a warrant article, but
Yes.
you're proposing to amend the bylaws for a few reasons. One is what Amy just mentioned, changing the $10,000 amount to $25,000. There's a couple other changes here, and one of them, concern that I had raised with the town administrator was that the proposal for existing 3, you're proposing to add a new number, paragraph 3, and change this to number 4, would have the capital committee submitting a report to the town administrator and the board of selectmen. I think that's inconsistent with the new special legislation governing the town administrator's duties. So I think we're going to have to conform this and make sure that what is the practice and what's in the bylaw will reflect what we've put in, what has gone into the special legislation to create the new duties of the town administrator. So obviously, we don't want them to be inconsistent. The bylaw was written a number of years ago, so it is inconsistent, but we need to make it in practice conform. And I don't know whether that has started, whether the town administrator and the capital committee have changed their practices this year in relation to the new role.
At this point, no. My understanding of what the what the town administrator will do will be to submit a capital budget or a capital plan, if you will, to the capital committee, and the capital
Yes.
committee will do its due diligence, but it still seems to me that it should be the capital committee's responsibility for reporting back its recommendations. So similar to the warrant committee, the capital committee will have recommendations, and they are just recommendations, but also give a report to town meeting.
I think the legislation and the proposed policy are reconcilable. I think it's simply a discussion between the town administrator and the capital committee as to how the town administrator wants to gather information, at what point do they want to be involved in the process, and how do they want the recommendation prepared. But all of those things, I think, are...
Well, I think we can conform it. I don't think the proposal currently before us conforms, but it's
It
not
may
hard
not,
to do.
because we didn't change that part of the bylaw, no.
Well, there's, in section 4, that it's adding in, the report shall be submitted to the town administrator and the board of selectmen for, the statute actually requires the town administrator prepare and present to the capital improvement planning committee and the board of selectmen a proposed capital budget for the town for the next 5 fiscal years. So I think it's doable. The current drafting, it just needs to be tweaked a little bit, I think, to make them consistent.
I think the question for the town administrator would be, with regard to the language in the statute, does the town administrator want the capital committee to do the staff work, or does the town administrator want to do the staff work himself?
Oh, I think there'll be definitely, coordination, communication, but I just want to make sure that any article that's going to attempt to revise the bylaw, because this will be a fight on the floor of town meeting, we just need to make sure it conforms to what the legislation is. The other change is this new paragraph, section 3, committee shall promulgate and update capital policies to be approved by the board of selectmen. I think we just need to change the wording, because I think we'd be promulgating it. And the capital committee can recommend. So wording change, but, we just need to keep the roles of the board and the committee. I think.
If I could just clarify, I only included this not to be an agenda item, but to show how this policy changed. So I really was trying to focus on showing how it would change the 10 to the 25,000. And so we didn't really spend a lot of time on trying to incorporate this with the new legislation. We were just trying to highlight for you how this policy may affect this. So I apologize if I made that confusing, but...
No, that's all right, but I think it's important that we have the discussion.
I wasn't meaning this would be the article, just that trying to highlight that there would be some effect on it.
So in old section 4, proposed new section 5, it looks like you're changing 5 years to 10 years. Is that a change that you're recommending also, or is that just...
Yeah, it's not spelled out in the program, but we felt that if you're saying that we can't, if the bylaw is saying that we can't do preliminary planning for things that are farther out than 10 years, that's going to take things like fire stations and big projects off the table. So we felt that the 5 years wasn't reasonable. So even though that's not outlined in the policies, we had talked as a committee that that should be something that maybe should be considered being changed.
I guess one question I have while the three of you from the committee are here is, section 1, and Leroy, you're on the Town Government Study Committee too, so, we've made this request before that the study committee look at the composition of the capital committee, and I know when Rick Neely, the chair of the committee, was in one of our meetings not too long ago, he said, we've looked at it, the precedent is there's really no real precedent because it's all over the map in the different towns as to what the composition of a capital committee is. Sometimes it's something similar to what we have, other times it might be more like the warrant committee and residents who are not members of elected or other appointed boards. So is that anything the capital committee's had any other discussion on?
We talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, not particularly extensively, but I think that this process has been very helpful in creating a cohesion on the committee that I think is helpful. We've got a new planning board member who's quite enthusiastic. So I would put this if it ain't broke, don't fix it category. But the Town Government Study Committee talked about it, the Capital Committee has talked about it, but I think the general consensus is that the committee's working well. This will help to clarify some of what happens when and how, and I think we're poised to do an even better job.
From my perspective on that, I think that you've got some critical components that are collectively communicating,
Yeah.
who understand the shortfalls, or with the basic needs, or great needs.
I think that's exactly
And I think that
right.
having that communication, just from my perspective, I think that this works pretty well.
There have been town meeting members who have raised this question, so I think if we were to go into town meeting with a bylaw to change any of the bylaw that governs the capital committee, that question probably would come up about the composition.
I think the problem has happened, and hopefully some of this, going to the 25,000 and the mindset of getting repairs and maintenance off of the capital plan. Number one, it shortens the capital plan to make it more manageable. I mean, right now, there's hundreds of things on it.
Well, it's mainly town and school facilities wise.
But there's
There's a
literally
lot of
hundreds of
little
things.
projects that are $10,000. So what the committee tries to do is we try to look at those and say, well, those really should be, if we're going to fund them, should be free cash. But really, it should be part of consolidated facilities operating budget. So it eats up a lot of our discussion, having those on, because you want to have a good repair and maintenance program in place to,
But somehow the
safeguard our
operating budgets have to
assets,
deal with that.
but it's showing up there, and
Major renovations, roofs, and, heating plants, yes, those are facilities and capital, and things you plan for. Certainly vehicle replacement you still want to consider. But to get it down to a manageable list, because what happens now too is that you get a 5-year list from the departments, and you look next year, and there's different things on it. Things that were on it last year aren't there anymore. So how can you plan, put a 5-year plan together when it's a moving target?
Right, and
It keeps,
prioritize,
yeah.
sure.
or the priorities change, which happens often with facilities. So that's why we try to roll it as one number in the article. And, I mean, those things just shouldn't be bonded. That's just not a smart idea. And if you talk to Bill Ritchie, right now, A might be a priority, and then something breaks and his priorities shift. But there's things on there like replacing tile floors and
Yeah, those aren't capital projects.
treads on stairs, things like that. But I think in his defense, where do they go? Because of the way we do the operating budget, where do they go? So that goes back to, he really should probably have a bigger appropriation that's enough to cover those kinds of things. So he's not at a loss as to where do I ask for them? And they are over 10,000, and they may have a life of more than 5 years, so it does sort of fit the definition, but they're really more repair and maintenance in nature. So we do make some judgment calls, and we do try to, not just try, I think we never bond anything like that. It's probably not even allowed, but in the event that there's no free cash,
Those things
then what happens to
don't get
those
done.
things? So,
Right.
Well, it looks like it's a good effort on the policies, so something we probably should, we've all had a chance to look at it, but only once, and if we have questions or comments, we may want to follow up with the committee on it and put this on a future agenda. Tom, I guess you're probably looking to have us replace the existing capital policy with these, or?
Either
Is that
replace or
accurate?
augment, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else for the capital committee? Or anything else either of you would like to present or
No, I
comment on?
think this is, as I said, I think this is an important step forward, and as David said, I think the committee itself is working well, so this will only help with that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Lori.
Have a good night.
On to number 9, which is discussion with the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee.
Grace?
Good evening, Therese. And good evening, Tim.
Yep.
Good evening. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for waiting. So we have a recommendation that you'd like us to approve for the designer for the shelter.
Yes. As co-chair of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, along with Dan Daly, we've gone through quite a bit of work starting in May of 2015, from site selection to the development of the building program to selection criteria for architects, and we have completed the RFQ and interviews of the architects. So we've gotten to a point in our work where we're happy to recommend the firm of Rauhaus Friedenfeld and Associates. They have done numerous shelters all over the country, and they're very well qualified for this work. They've done small and large shelters, so we feel confident that they can work within the budget that's allocated for this and do a great job for the Milton Animal League and the town.
That's great. So I noticed it was, the budget for this particular contract was capped at 200, was it?
Yes. That was a gift of the Milton Animal League for the design services.
Okay.
And that was based on a percentage of what they predicted the
The
overall
total
cost to be.
dollar cost was, yep.
So I had a question, because the letter that you sent to the board says, we asked the Board of Selectmen to work with the principals of the firm that we'd be awarding this to determine the fee for services. Did the bids not have any, was there not a dollar amount associated with the bids? I was just confused on that based on reading this memo.
The RFQ included it was a not-to-exceed price, and we mirrored the, in a lot of ways, the RFQ for the fire space needs study. And there's just one element in there that sort of says the process is the committee will make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will negotiate a contract not to exceed $200,000. I understand that the Fire Space Needs Study Committee sort of handled a lot of that within their committee and just made a sort of full recommendation to the selectmen, which, I mean, I think the Animal Shelter Committee would be happy to undertake that. They were just sort of following the RFQ really directly to the letter. This is my first one, so I wanted to make sure I was on the straight and narrow.
Is this small enough it does not need a construction project manager?
It does not need a
Does not,
construction
okay, we'll
project
check that,
manager.
okay.
Okay, do we have any other comments or questions for the committee and for Tim?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to award the contract to Rauhaus Friedenfeld and Associates for the design of the new animal shelter subject to successful contract negotiations.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The contract negotiations would be by the advisory committee or the selectmen?
Well, I guess that's what we have to figure out, because
That has to be answered, right?
the letter we have is asking the board to work with the firm to determine the fee, and we really haven't been a part of this process. Your memo sets out a pretty detailed process you went through. We had a lot of interviews. Each of the members of the committee did some of the checking the references. So the committee is very familiar with what the three bids were and what your process has been. Did we get any
Sure,
direction on
the
that
committee
from
would be
the town's attorneys? No.
No, as Mr. Zawinski mentioned, when the Fire Space Needs Committee came before you, the board put it back in the lap of the Fire Space Needs Committee to do the negotiations.
Yeah, I think
What's the
that's
sense of the
fine.
board? Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am.
I think you can have a lot of confidence in this committee. I know the Shade Tree Committee was up here earlier, and they sounded like they really meant business. I was really impressed with them. You should also be very impressed with the committee you appointed for this project. There's a lot of good expertise, and they've been working very hard on this project, so.
We
I
do.
think
And
you
we've
can
got
have
a couple of
lot confidence.
architects on this committee, so I think they're going to be more familiar with these bids than we are.
And Mr. Ritchie as well.
Yes, and Bill Ritchie.
That's great.
Thanks so
Okay,
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see this coming along.
Yes.
It's been a long time in the coming, hasn't it been, Teresa? Okay, thank you. Next is Joe Lynch, and a report on the Department of Public Works.
Hey, Joe.
Good evening, how you
Joe,
doing?
good evening again.
Hi again.
That's Emily and Anne Marie. This is for you folks. Okay. I see the lengthy agenda you have, and I know sometimes my quarterly reports seem like an annual report. And so I'm going to be pithy. I'm going to just hit on the main points. You can read this at your leisure. If there's any follow-up questions, I encourage you to give me a call, and I'll try to answer those directly. If you feel I need to come back to, expand upon them, I can do that as well. So I broke my quarterly report down into the various aspects of the types of work that we performed. Water work, which is our major project area for this past year and a half, has been the completion of that $6.8 million project. It's comprised of really 4 separate phases, segments, if you will, 3 of which were all related to that high-pressure, high-service area at the Canton Town line. Basically, the water tanks, one was completed last fall, one was completed this past summer, and the water main installation work was all completed at the end of mostly at the end of last fall, and then some of the finishing work was completed the early spring and summer of this year, and the PRV valve project was completed in the spring of this year as well. Together, they're all completed, they're working well, they're functioning as designed, and more importantly, is Canton has weaned themselves off of us, our system. They are autonomous. We are now our own, in control of our own system, and the project was completed 5 months ahead of schedule and on budget.
Good.
The other part of that same aspect was working with the DCR Blue Hill Ski Area operator, and with regards to our ability to be able to service them with water supply, and we were able to. We kind of dug our heels in a bit. They were looking for deep discounts. We worked with DCR pretty hard on a lot of different things, and this seemed to be one issue that they kept coming back to. We didn't need to compromise anything, because in the end, the ski area operator buying water directly from us was in fact substantially cheaper than buying water from Canton. Our rates are that much lower. So they completed their work this past spring. This season, they will be our, I dare say, our largest water customer moving forward, beginning this winter. And that's done. Sewer work. 2 aspects of the sewer work. Our inflow and infiltration program, which was the second bullet, is an ongoing project every single year, where we take a section of our system and we look at the current condition and design the aspects of what we might rehabilitate next year, and at the same time, we're rehabilitating in this current year those things that we identified last year. To that end, we did over 20,000 linear feet of sewer main rehabilitation. That's 3.8 miles. That all was completed this past summer, and with the follow-up testing this past fall. There's 1 round of follow-up testing that will be done again in the spring, but those are very important things, because every gallon of groundwater you remove out of your system is a gallon that doesn't go down the pipe, doesn't get measured by the MWRA, doesn't get treated by the MWRA, and ultimately saves us on the rates that we charge our folks. The second piece of that is, just the first bullet, are the condition of 2 of our force mains. Force mains are the pipe that conveys pumped sewerage from the low-lying areas and gets them back up to a gravity state. 2 areas in particular, one on Granite Avenue, there's a pump station down there, that pumps the sewerage from down near the DOT yard up towards Squantum Street. The other is Randolph Avenue, which is the low end down by Hallen Ave, down by the Wollaston Golf Course, and it pumps it up towards Reed Street along Randolph Avenue. Both of those mains are highly deteriorated. Think of the corrosiveness of the water, of the sewerage that's in there, and you know, the situation with our water pipes and the need to replace them. They only are that much more accelerated when you're looking at sewer pipes. The complexity here is, they had considerable leak history, by the way, multiple breaks on each of these lines. Complexity with both of these is they're both in state roadways, one of which was recently repaved 2 years ago, and one of which was actually 3 years ago, and one of which was repaved about 10 years ago. We're working with DET to find out what the ultimate restoration standard of this roadway is, but we'll be coming in with a project for next year. We're in the midst of understanding what that is, completing our bid documents, and we'll be coming with the project to be constructed next summer, maybe early spring. On the highway side of things, that's basically our roadway reconstruction program. Our roadway reconstruction program is done as a compilation of our water project needs, because of those roadways we dig up because of deficient water systems, and of course those roadways that are just deteriorated on their own account. The work that we worked on this year, and anybody, I'm sure you folks got a lot of phone calls, but anybody who drives around town has realized that there was an awful lot of construction going on this past year. I dare say probably more than anybody has ever undertaken in recent history, if not long history. But what was built, or at least under some level of reconstruction this year, was Hillside Street, Forest Street, which was both full length, Brook Road, which was from Center Avenue to Canton Avenue. That was a combination project between Safe Routes to School as well as what we added on as part of our own work. Canton Avenue, which is from 138 all the way to Blue Hill Parkway, that was the large corridor that was a result of both the deteriorated road as well as the water main that needed to be laid in there. That project is complete up to the point of from 138 up to Apple. We do have more work to do from Apple up to the Blue Hill Parkway. In a very similar fashion at the same location is Sumner Street, extending from Canton up as far as Pope Hill, and Harlan continuing from Canton heading down to the dead end, are all going to be done as part of that same roadway segment. Goal is to try to continue to work so long as the weather holds out. Our sidewalk contractors are out there every day working when the weather's good. The hope is to get all of those roads completed this fall, before winter. Reality is we may still be coming back to put some finished top on in the spring. All of the roads will be winter-ready, though.
Joe, go ahead.
Go ahead. On that point, because probably all of us have gotten some complaints about the fact that the work started months ago, and there's still raised sewer covers, there's still sidewalks not finished, as you said. Is it the consortium bidding that we get into that causes the delays, so that, because we're bidding with a lot of other communities, we're getting better pricing, but it's extending out the time frame? That's been my understanding, why these projects are taking so long. But a lot of residents are asking those questions, and one of them said to me recently, look, if we have an early snowfall, those snowplows are going to hit those raised sewer covers on Canton Ave.
They will all, if any roadway is not ready to be paved this fall, all of those manhole covers will be raised, lowered down to grade. There aren't many of them left, by the way. Most of those areas where they were up have all been paved. So there's very few areas. Most of the areas that are left are actually where the covers are down low to begin with. But there are some that do need to be.
But is it the consortium bidding, because there's so many demands on their time among other communities, is that the reason for the delay?
I'm kind of smiling here, because typically I would say absolutely positively that's the case, but this year we are being criticized. We grabbed the consortium contractors ahead of the other towns. They're working in Milton. We gobbled up a huge amount of the effort as compared to our colleagues in the other towns. They're criticizing us for using the time. So it's actually the opposite being true this year. But in years past, it was the other way around, that we were falling victim to other people getting scheduled early on. But we had a good winter, thank God, last year, and we started very early, and as a result, we just locked into our contracts early.
But yeah, you're right. It does seem like the Canton Ave especially is taking forever.
Yeah.
The other concern on Canton Ave was probably 2 weeks the sidewalk was unpassable because there were mounds of dirt between the gas station and Robbins. And I mean, it's fine now, obviously, it's been taken care of, but it scared me a little bit to have, a major route to schools with a sidewalk absolutely unpassable.
Was this Canton Ave down near the Glover School, the Safe
No,
Schools project?
Near the gas station.
Yeah. There were 3-foot mounds of dirt right in the middle. You couldn't use the sidewalk. So you were forced to walk on Canton Ave for that stretch.
I'm actually not aware of that circumstance. So the sidewalk areas, they only tear up what they're going to grade and work on that given day and grade out and compact, so it's really not impassable for more than that one day. The area where you're working,
Because
talking about
I
the
walked
sidewalk hasn't even been done, that's probably part of the old water project.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it was flattened out for a while, and then it looked like the curb was put in, so they dug all the dirt up, and then from the beginning of a week, over a weekend until the following Monday, there were...
How far back? Because I'll ask.
I would say, well, because I tripped and fell on it. It was probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay, so recent history, okay.
Yeah.
I'll talk to John Thompson tomorrow and find out what the circumstances was. I wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that a sidewalk be impassable for that long.
Joe,
period of
back
time.
to just those raised sewer covers. You want to get those roads winter ready. 2 weeks from now, in December, we could get a plowable snow. So what do you anticipate?
If we had a forecast looming that we saw a storm coming, you could with our own forces, we could lower those all in two days. So that's what we're counting on if that is necessary. The goal is we don't want to lower them necessarily, because as we're making progress with the sidewalk work and our paving guy comes in, we just as soon get the roads paved.
Yeah, I was just, worst-case scenario,
Yeah,
trying to find out exactly.
We're able to jump right on them and lower them, with a couple of days' notice, watching storms looming.
Okay.
So the other, we talked about Holland, Sumner, Canton Avenue, which is Reedsdale to School Street. We basically took the Safe Routes to School project, which was right at Canton and Brook itself, and then we radiated it out from that. We took Canton Avenue all the way up to Library Corner. We took Canton Avenue the rest of the way to School Street. We took Brook from Canton all the way out to Central. All of those roadway segments were in pretty bad shape and deteriorated, and we really didn't want to be responsible having, this $1 million investment from the federal government right in the smack dab in the middle, and all this deteriorated stuff around it. So we piggybacked on and added those areas to it. In the same vein, School Street was in deplorable condition. I was literally spending $15,000 a year in patching that roadway. We needed a water main in there, so we actually did a change order through our water main contractor. We completed that fire flow loop that we needed to. That work was done this past spring, and School Street at this point has all been pulverized and received the leveling course, so just a waiting top at this point. So that was a last-minute expansion we put in only because of all the other improvements being done around it. Safe Routes to School, just for the folks at home, need to understand, that was $1 million in Federal Highway Administration financing. That was a grant that we pursued for about 10 years and finally completed it this year. So that was really encouraging.
On that project related to the Safe Routes to Schools, and this may sound petty, but if you're driving, there's a lot of signs right in that area. So if you're right at the Glover School, and if you're driving, say, west, you're coming from East Milton Square going west, especially at night. I mean, I have not heard this from any other residents, but I've noticed it myself. Driving through there's 2 or 3 signs that just show where the crosswalk is. There's a multitude of other signs there that I guess my question is there some, because it's a federal project, is there some federal regulation that tells you how many signs you need to have in that area? Or is there any way we can eliminate some of them? Because I think it's distracting to drivers going through there.
So
Can I add something before, just that way to make it easier for your response? One of the things that I've heard and I've actually experienced is coming out of Glover School, okay, you're on Canton Avenue, and if you want to cross and continue on Canton Avenue to the library, there are signs, there's a little island right there. There are signs that block your view to Brook Road. It's actually dangerous. You have to keep inching out to be
Southbound
able
on
to see.
Canton. I've seen it myself.
Okay?
It's a sign, it's the height of the signs, exactly.
It's right in the
They're
driver's view.
line of sight.
Okay, and that I feel that could be problematic, especially in the morning. You've got a lot of cars that are heading towards the middle school, cars that are trying to get across or make the turn. There's been some close calls.
Yep, I know exactly where you're talking about, and we've actually talked to the state about that. So the feedback we've gotten from the state, and we knew this going into the project when you use federal highway money, the project goes through a very arduous review process, both at the state and federal level. They meet the MUTCD, that's the code, so that the signs are required. We can't remove the signs for at least a 2-year period. What we can do is, in the case what we've just identified, where there are deficiencies or if there are sight distance issues, we can modify them in such a way as to make them, safer, but we can't remove them. So.
For a 2-year period.
For a 2-year period.
But after that point, it just seems to me there's an awful lot. There's the picture of the parent and the child crossing the street, and there's arrows pointing to the crosswalk, and then a few feet away, there's another arrow, another sign that tells you where the crosswalk is. And at night, the headlights on those signs really are distracting. So, maybe there's some adjustments that you can make to it to address that, but it sounds like the issue David raises is at least more of a public safety issue than a distraction issue.
The point that David raises, I've seen myself, that absolutely positively, I know if you're heading southbound on Canton with the Glover School to your back, that intersection, if you're looking to the right, even though this intersection is realigned more perpendicular, that sign is right in your way, and you can't see the 200 feet down the road, and given the rate of speed they're traveling, it's in the way. That sign is blocking visibility. So that one we can certainly modify.
Good.
And will. don't really need to go into great detail on stormwater. It seems like you guys lived the stormwater saga.
Before you get there, Joe, can I ask one more question on roadways? And we've only got a few speed humps in the town. I mean, there's 2 on Harlan, there's the one on Hillside. One on Hillside's great right now because you can...
Two on Hillside.
Okay.
One on Forest, and 2 on Harlan.
Yeah, okay, so the one on Hillside, because it's brand new, the striping is wonderful on it, you can see it. The ones on Harlan now, I don't know when the last time they were striped, but I mean, they're starting to get pretty bare. Is there any way that we can make sure that those things, especially on those speed humps where, I mean, if you're not careful, I mean, you're going to launch yourself. And to make sure that at least every year, those things get restriped.
I'm laughing because on the day I was hired, Kevin Murren took me around town and showed me the areas, and then I went out reconnoitering on my own, just driving along, and I'm driving down this road that I've never been on before, and I put my head almost through the ceiling of my car, because like, where the heck did that come from? And it was on Holland. It's exactly the location.
Yeah. Even if you try.
What we did is the MUTCD now has this template, which is
Yeah,
using.
they
expanding.
those are great.
So what it does is it lends some advanced warning visibility.
Mm-hmm.
It allows a compliant hump, which is much shorter, to function because you get the slowing down effect of people coming into it because they see it.
Exactly.
We did that as a test, knowing there's been an awful lot of pushback and a lot of concerns on the Hillside Neighborhood Association. We did that as a test, and we find that they were successful. We intend to implement that on Highland as well.
Okay, and just keep it done, so that
And then we keep them freshened up.
Yeah.
What we did was thermoplastic, so that's a different material. That lasts 5 years, so you don't need to go out and repaint every year.
Okay.
Again, stormwater, the biggest aspects is we continue to comply with our existing permit. We've sweeping the streets, catch basin cleaning. We removed an awful lot of material, almost 3,600 tons of material from the DPW yard last spring and early summer. We're in the midst of processing some of that material right now and screening out loam to use for roadway shoulder treatments in rural areas where it's allowed to be used. Not so much where you would want to put the lawn in someone's front yard, but we're doing that as we go on. As you all know, we've had some great success, very ambitious undertaking to get the utility in place, the regulations updated, and the bylaw modified to allow for the fee to be put in place, which was done. So that was a huge accomplishment, and actually spoke with the consortium group today on some of the things that they should be considering for how they want to approach their towns. Bottom line of all that is extremely long detailed analysis. As everybody, I hope, realizes, when a planning estimate is done, as the whole public hearing process was moving forward, it was all based on planning estimates. But in the end, when we sat down with our GIS and we looked at the 4 residential tiers and all the other tiers, and following the guidance of this Board of Selectmen and what came out of those hearings, in the end, the projection is we are within 0.5% of the revenue projection on the higher side, so a little bit of a cushion, so that the effort was extremely fruitful and very accurate. We're in the midst of closing out that analysis and hoping to put those bills out, very early in January, right after the holiday season, as we had talked about. If you remember, 1 bill per year, at least in the first round. We think it's probably better than doing them quarterly, especially when on most of the residential properties, they're not all that big to begin with.
Great.
Solid waste, I think what's important to point out is that as of July 1st, we just entered the 3rd year of a 5-year contract. Katie remembers.
That's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe. Katie and Anne Marie remember, they sat on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I'm going to be asking this board in the wintertime to reconvene that committee. We need to start talking about what do we like, what we don't like about the 2-day program, the contractor, the savings, the lack of savings, all the things. It's time to come out in the midst of that conversation, make a determination. Do we want to do we even want to consider entering into contract extension negotiations with the current vendor, or do we simply want to say, well, let's wait and maybe we just put it back out to bid? So that's the time. It's upon us again. It seems like it's still a couple of years off, but boy, it's right around the corner.
Personal observation, the 2-day program, I think, is great. It's much better than the 4 or 5 day one where you're constantly, rotating for holidays.
Stuck my neck out there. I didn't know what to expect, but I was hopeful, and in the end, the committee did an awful lot of hard work. I think we all understood it was change. Change is not always embraced wholesomely. In this instance, we convinced folks that the change was a one-time change. Once your day was your day, it wasn't going to change again.
Yep.
And it worked out well. And as far as services levels are concerned, things like snow emergencies, statistically, you're that much better off when you're only dealing with 2 days instead of 5.
Right.
You're just not as likely to get delays. We've
Well,
had
and we
zero cancellations.
We had a good cost savings with this contract, too.
Oh, yeah.
That was huge.
The thing it's important, you probably all remember, because I think you were all on the board when this contract went in place. We realized the benefit of this particular contractor having lost a portion of his contract in another community, which freed up his trucks and his personnel 2 days a week. That may or may not ever present itself again. The sooner we reconvene this committee and understand, might we want to renegotiate, the better off we are to maybe continue that benefit for another few years beyond the contract life. Trees. I don't know what more to say about the trees, other than the tree committee.
They did a great job.
Did a great job. We've been working very closely with them, both my staff and myself. They're great folks. One of our biggest ambitions, besides chasing money, is getting that reinstatement as Tree City USA. There are two things that we really have to do. We had it 8 years in a row. When we get reinstated, we'll be a 9-year community again, but we've been out for 2 years. We don't have a certified arborist as our tree warden. That's a problem. And we don't have 2 other criterias in order to actually be designated as Tree City USA. As Katie, you pointed out, we come in, we ask for proclamation, we used to plant the tree, we do a ceremony, we would do all those things that would otherwise kept us eligible, but when they strengthen the requirements to keep your eligibility up, we need to make some changes to have that
So we need the
happen.
money and we need the certified tree warden.
Not so much the money, because I think, again, it's a low hurdle. I hate to say it.
$2.
The money we're spending destroying the forest by our tree equipment and our fuel and cutting trees down and chips and so on and so forth, all counts towards your grant money. Not so much just planting trees. So if you plant trees, you're that much better off as well. But we do have a couple of technicalities that we do need to cross that is simply more than spending money. But the Shade Tree Committee is a fabulous group of people. Designated space, that is buzzwords for the union folks don't have a place to wash, shower, meet, congregate, have lunch, and 2 things that a lot of employees ought to have in a workplace. Long process through understanding their concern to having a study committee look at the entire yard facility, all the way to finding that rehabbing one particular building wouldn't deviate from the overall master plan, to moving that forward this past winter. That project is about 75% complete. They're hanging drywall today as we speak, maybe not at this hour, but they were earlier when they left. And we're expecting to have this facility complete in use for most of this winter season. The goal was to have a Thanksgiving gathering for the troops. It's not going to happen in that facility, but the second goal is to have that thing at Christmas time, and we might be able to meet that. So that's a real good project and much deserved for the workers. Just statistically speaking, since January of this year, DPW, we've received 1,208 service requests and entered 2,201 work orders, meaning we had 1,208 requests for just general information, and then beyond that, 2,200 of those, none of those additional, became work that actually needed to be carried out in the field, whether it was pruning a tree, removing a tree, patching a pothole, a stripe, replacing a sign, or so on. What that really boils down to is that we're taking 6 of those requests every single day for service requests, and 11 work orders are generated every single day, and that the best measure that we can get is we're getting close to the 90% closure rate on both of our service requests and work orders. And the reality is you say, well, let's strive for 100. Many of those requests come in, that may be, please repave my street, it's falling apart. that goes beyond a work order, goes on beyond, it just
Yeah, a
bring it
little
to your
bit, yeah,
attention.
yeah.
So those still show as open items. But I know that was real quick. I know I didn't go through it word for word like I've been accustomed to in the past.
Joe, since, could you just take a couple of minutes to talk about the snow policy and the procedures, because we're coming into the winter season.
Sure.
Just to people who are watching, just to inform them as to, we passed a snow policy earlier this year. I think you and the town administrator and Tom McCarthy have been meeting to discuss it and make sure we're ready for winter. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're adhering to it pretty arduously, and the things that are just routinely that we do. The barn is full. The equipment is mostly prepped. They're still working on prep, for the minor stuff, lighting packages and whatnot. But all the heavy stuff is already complete. Contract invitations are out to all of our prior contracts. We've expanded to new contractors. We've sat and reassessed our existing plow routes and our sanding routes. We sat and not so much impact bargain because it wasn't necessary, but we did sit down with the union in various departments represented by the same union, because the folks that are in the DPW labor union are also represented by folks in the cemetery, the park department, and consolidated facilities. So we've reached out to grant opportunities for to all of those departments and all of those similar unions. So trying to, get increase in body count and equipment count, when the big storms come. So we've done that, and that's in place, and we've reached an agreement with the union folks of how that happens. We've looked at call-in policies, and we've laid out official policies to the workforce to know what the expectations are moving forward. So we've had some recent changes in personnel down at the yard, and they didn't just roll over and accept these. They considered them very carefully and agreed to give us a shot this year to make sure that they work. So that's going great. Folks at home, this is the time of year they're going to be getting the letter from me. We know there are 174 basketball hoops, planters, hockey nets out on public property. We're going to give folks till December 1st, a little bit of grace period beyond that, to remove those to their own private yards before we start going out and having to confiscate them. All those things don't belong in the streets to begin with. It's never safe to be playing in the street, even on the best of streets, I suppose. But when a basketball net or hockey net is in the gutter and my trucks are going by, it has a couple of impacts. It requires that I lose the gutter, or meaning we end up favoring the middle of the street and we don't plow as close as we need to. Or more important, we do a lot of damage to our vehicles, especially when we hit basketball nets at night that we don't see. Tearing mirrors off, breaking windshields, breaking side mirrors. So that's the time of year that those orders will be going out. Will be next week.
Okay.
Our general policy, I reviewed it, and we'll have to report back later. We did, folks in my engineering department went to a architectural access board in a handicap compliance symposium just a week and a half ago, and what came out of that is a clear indication we need to review our official printed policy that's now in place when it comes to sidewalk snow removal. We were, I think, careful to point out we don't have such a bylaw, and as a result, you ought to do it on your own. Two choices. You either do all the sidewalks in town, or you put a bylaw in place requiring people to shovel their sidewalks in front of their house from an architectural access perspective. So we're going to have to review that more carefully, and I'll have to report that back to you at a future date. Okay. That seems to be a deficiency in our policy.
Okay.
Joe, now, thank you again. This is a good report and a lot of positive things happening, but there's one thing that I do want to mention that concerns me is the residents' experience in working with your department, okay? Constituent services, basic services can be a big deal, especially as we start to get towards winter. And, what are you doing right now actively within your department to ensure that we're going to be able to meet the needs of our residents? Because we've had a lot of concerns over the last, since I was elected.
With regards to winter?
With regards to interfacing with your department on an everyday level, okay? What I'd like to see, okay, is some sort of human connection to a resident. Is it possible? And if not, what are you going to do to make sure that residents are heard in a timely manner? Because that's something that does concern me.
Yeah, So the work order tracking system, I think, has been a huge improvement in that direction. What we can improve upon beyond that is when a work order is closed out and the work is physically done, people know it's been done. When something may take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get completed, the folks who made that initial call don't necessarily know it might take that long. So I think on the intake side of it, when we understand what the type of work is, we're very careful to let them know we've received the order, it's been written, it may take a period of time to get it done, and we try to give that right up front. We could always improve better with service requests that come in that maybe at the time of the phone call, it's not clear what they're asking. It's simply, we're asking you to go out and look at something. So depending on what we see there, I think there needs to be follow-up. If there is something that we see that doesn't warrant an actual work order being done, that we let those folks know that it was inspected, it was assessed, and this is what the findings were. Because I think that's where some of the gaps are occurring on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, I just think that we owe it to our residents and the taxpayers, as you did create a great snow policy, but to create a policy on how we communicate and respond, because your department is a big department that interfaces with the community on a regular basis, and I think it would only make you stronger to have a good plan in place and a backup plan should you not be able to have any human interaction. I think that it should be clear to residents. I think it would take a lot of the problems out of what you may run into with your work orders and not being so clear as to the timing. I think that it's something that we should be proactive on.
I think the thing is, Joe, most people, unfortunately, when they call DPW, don't call it the praise. They usually call it because they have some kind of a complaint, a concern. So they already are coming in with if they're not just totally upset, they're concerned. So if they don't, with that heightened awareness, if they don't get feedback right away, then
it's not all doom and gloom, Tom. I think it's...
Well, no, I mean, you do get
three
some.
levels.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of people who come in or who make a contact, whether it's email or a telephone, who require information, and they find that information to be quite useful. So those folks are in pretty good shape. And there are folks who come in with just general concerns, and they're satisfied with what they hear. But there are those folks who've already been angered by something to begin with, and when they come in, you've almost lost them from the beginning. And those are the folks that, are quite vocal. And they're also the vocal majority, vocal minority, when it comes out to they're the loudest, but they're not representative of the overall picture for sure. And to the good people's credit in town here, we do get some compliment calls. Those are what keep us going.
I'm sure you do.
So I think that you've got a great group of committed workers. Okay, people that work very hard every day, and they should be commended. But I just think that it's my opinion. Okay, that we can do a better job at enhancing our communication, because I think that it'll better serve your department long term. And I think that we should be actively looking at finding ways to be able to make the quality resident experience even better.
Okay, do we have anything else? Joe, I know we've got an amendment of an agreement with the City of Boston that you want to get to. Is there anything else before we get to that you wanted to cover? No.
No, I got what I did, and you've got your reading. If you want to read that, and if any follow-up questions, by all means, just give me a call back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we have an amendment to an agreement between the Town of Milton and the Boston Water and Sewer Commission. This is regarding stormwater. Joe, I had one question for you. It looks like all you're asking here is to extend it for 5 years. The original agreement was signed before I was on the board. There's reporting requirements in there, there's cooperation provisions. Does that happen on a regular basis? Are you satisfied that the agreement, as it currently exists between Milton and Boston, is everybody's complying with what is required by this agreement?
Sure. Just so everybody on the board knows, and the folks at home can understand, Boston is one of those Tier 1 communities. They have to have intermunicipal agreements by law. Milton, on the other hand, we're a Tier 2 community, are not required to have intermunicipal agreements. So Boston needs this from us. We don't need to have it with them, or any other abutting community for that matter. So where it has worked is we had some areas in Boston had some areas where they were measuring high bacteria counts in their stormwater system. You've heard this when we're talking about what we're going to be required to do. Boston's been needing to do that for the past 12 years. They found some high bacteria in some of their streams, and they were able to trace it up to an area bordering Milton. And they worked with us to do, with our II program, inflow and infiltration program, to see if we had what was called an exfiltration problem, if we had leaky pipes, if we had anybody's who had failed septic systems, or maybe they had failed service. As we worked with them on a very cooperative basis, that's the only time we've ever used it. And in that end, we found it was actually animal waste that was making its way into the stormwater. It was not attributed to the sewer system in Milton at all, but it was right on the bordering streets. And it obligated Boston to work with us.
So you don't have any concerns with the periodic reporting requirements or anything else in the existing contract? That
None.
Everything is working okay?
It works very well, thanks.
Okay, good.
The first one was reviewed by John Flynn. John has had this for a while. I attempted to reach out to him today to verify the status. I did send him a reminder last week, so it is, short of the date, it's verbatim.
It looked pretty straightforward. It's really just changing the date.
So if you wish to vote it contingent upon
That's what we'll do.
Mr. Flynn's form and content, that's fine.
So I'll make a motion to approve a 5-year extension to the intermunicipal agreement between the town of Milton, the city of Boston, Water and Sewer Commission through December 31st, 2021, subject to approval as to form and content by town council.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay. Good evening. There's nothing else, right?
No, that's all. Thank you, Joe. Have a good night. Number 12 is a discussion about some town meeting articles, and we put this on the agenda because the January deadline for the town meeting articles will be fast approaching. We've only got a couple more meetings. There's a couple, I know the town administrator wants to speak to the third one. The first one is, we put on the agenda is the noise bylaw, which we submitted last May. Was referred back for further study. There was some talk about limiting it to construction projects. So the question is, do we want to put that forward? I know we had a brief conversation with the planning board last summer about it, and
I mean, it's got to kind of come out of the planning board, but I would like to see it come forward. I think it is an issue, and that along with the sign bylaw.
I think there was enough discussion at town meeting about it, you know,
yeah.
and I think that, I agree with Tom. I'd like to see it come forward. I think it's got to come out of the planning board, obviously, but
I think their view was that it's not a zoning bylaw, and that it's really in our court, because it's more of a police regulation type thing. So Joe Prondak was the one who initially had put this idea forward, and he had done some research on other communities, but the bylaw written by town council's office was much broader than construction projects. And I think that was the message we got back from town meeting, was that to limit it so that people doing projects on their own homes wouldn't be subject to it.
And that became problematic too, because people can do some pretty loud and, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a contractor or the homeowner, if they're out there.
That's the difficulty.
Yeah.
And at what time in the morning do they
And
start?
like I keep saying, you know, my neighbor behind me has a front loader and a bucket loader on his property all the time. And I've seen it run at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, and
the difficulty, though, was the clear message from town meeting was that there was some sentiment at town meeting not to have it apply to those personal projects. So I guess the question for us is, over the next few weeks, while we're leading up to the January 5th deadline, are we looking to put this forward, and do we want to limit it to just construction? Obviously, that's going to have to be revised by town council's office and with some input from Joe Prondak, but, you know, do we want to put this forward again?
Yes, I would like to still. I mean, I guess it's going to take some work in terms of getting it in a form that makes sense. My recollection is the last time it was primarily construction-type projects. It wasn't limited to construction companies.
Right, that's right.
That was my recollection as well, and I think that, you know, the consensus was that, you know, even whether it be a Sunday, people wanted to be able to do work on their house, because that might be the only time that they had an opportunity to do work on their house, you know. But you're right, there's a lot of work to be done if we're going to get this forward. I'd like to have it myself, but there's an awful lot of work to be done.
Well, and I think that could mean working with Joe Prondak and also with town council's office. do one of us want to take that one on to kind of be the board's point person on the noise bylaw, which it may be more just coordinating with Joe and with town council?
Yeah, I'll do that, that's fine.
Okay.